Anger. That is the topic for today's video. Anger. There's about a million things I could say about it, but I'm going to tell you about how I've processed it, how I'm choosing to move through it, how I'm choosing to utilize it moving forward, how it's defined my life and the way in which I interact with the world, the negative and the positive. If that sounds interesting, stick around. I'm Taylor, the Sheepish Goat, and you're watching the channel. Let's talk about anger for me. When I think of anger, I think of yelling. When I think of anger, I think of condescension. When I think of anger, I think of aggression and violence. That is what I think of inherently when I think of anger. That's because I've had no real healthy examples of anger in my life. See, in therapy, I've recently been talking about this with my therapist, V, and it's something that I'm moving through that's going to take probably a little bit of time. I started defining what anger was for me. And for me, it was just rage. It was pure, unbridled, unfiltered rage. That is what anger has historically meant for me, and why I've been struggling to find my place in it, struggling to understand it and deal with it in the past. My therapist says to me, like, have you never had anyone that just says, Taylor, I'm angry with you? It almost sounded like a joke in some regard because no. I've never had anyone just calmly, directly, sternly say, I'm angry with you. I don't like that. I'd like you to stop. That's never happened in my entire life. The main ways in which I've encountered anger in my life are three direct ways. One is rage. Retaliating to something that is happening to you with all of your might. I don't like this. Fuck this. This is a piece of shit. I don't like you. Shut up. Anger, violence. It doesn't have to be physical attacking, but it could be. It could get to that. It is scary, and it is uncertain. It feels as if anything can happen in those moments. That's the primary way in which I think of anger. The other two ways for me are exploding. Someone who is relatively quiet and calm most of the time. They keep it internally until the point at which it can no longer be held back, and then they explode. That anger hits the same point of rage. In some capacity, it can feel more scary because that person isn't normally in that mode. So when it hits, you don't even expect it, but it becomes the same unfiltered, uncharacteristic, though, type of anger and rage. The third is passive aggression. Passive aggression is also toxic, not as inherently dangerous, perhaps, maybe covertly, but passive aggression usually takes the form of like, I'm not angry, I'm just disappointed. It's a lot of behind the scenes covert manipulation, frankly, because that person is inherently incapable of expressing how they really feel. So they're going to talk around the product. They're going to talk around the idea of what's happening and probably make you feel guilty for whatever is happening, as opposed to just being honest and direct with you. Those are three ways in which I've historically encountered anger. Now, how have I historically processed anger? Okay, well, I have been uncomfortable with it for my entire life. Generally, when someone is angry with me, it has made me very nervous, especially in the last, let's say, 10 years. If someone is angry, I am usually under the assumption that they're going to be aggressive, or at least my body naturally assumes that stance. I get very nervous and I become appeasing. My goal is to stop this as quickly as possible, to be the mediator, to be the calm one, the best I can. The problem is that in those moments, I don't state my discomfort. In those moments, I'm incapable of voicing my needs and my boundaries, right? I can't say, hey, please don't talk to me that way. I don't like that. That makes me feel uncomfortable. Or you're projecting far too much onto me, or this is making me feel unsafe. None of that has been able to happen for me in the past because the anger feels overwhelming. It makes me feel small. It makes me feel weak. It makes me feel like I am nothing in that moment. That is how anger has historically made me feel. I'm just complying and waiting for it to stop. So if that's the way in which I've historically dealt with anger or had a response to anger, then how have I processed my anger? Maybe that is the next question, right? Not well. In the past, I have swallowed my anger. The problem is that I saw all of this around me, and I didn't want to be that way. In some capacity, I was told that I wasn't that way, and that made me feel as if I couldn't be. I was told that I was the good one, or I wasn't that way. I wasn't like the other one, so therefore I am incapable of being that way. I've been put in a box out of a safety guard, basically. So because I didn't want to be that way, I didn't want to represent what I was seeing around me, then I was calm and collected, and I wasn't aggressive, and I wasn't, even more so, I wasn't vocal in my needs. I minimized myself to the extent of where I really didn't have needs, which means that I never really got angry and I never really got upset. If I did, what happened is I usually would be the one to explode. Very rarely, because I didn't like it. But there was a few instances where there were certain people in my life who knew exactly how to push my buttons. And I would stay calm, and I would stay calm, and I would stay calm up until the point in which I couldn't hold it anymore. And when I couldn't hold it anymore, I would explode, and I would lose my cool. And in those moments, I always felt like the biggest piece of shit, because I became exactly what I didn't want to be. It made me resent myself because I couldn't stay so in control that I would never be angry. That was my goal, that I just wouldn't be angry. I wouldn't be that rage that I saw around me. That made me feel terrible. So when I enacted that, when I showed those traits, it made me feel terrible about myself. And it harbored this underlying guilt and resentment for myself anytime I would feel angry. Moreover, like I said, this ability or this overall feeling of like I can't be angry played into my perfectionism. And it played into the idea of like, I can't ever be that way. I have to be perfect. I have to be in control. I have to be the happy, peaceful, copacetic people pleaser. That's generally how I processed my anger. I swallowed it all inside. As a kid, I remember screaming into my pillow. I remember if I was home alone or if I was the first one home, I would be in my room and I would be screaming into my pillow because I was so overwhelmed. Or when I had a car, I would be in my car screaming at the top of my lungs, trying to get it out of my body because I didn't know what else to do with it. Because I didn't want to direct it at anyone, but I felt so much internal pain. So how did all of those resentments, how did that impact me? Very terribly. It caused extreme cases of anxiety. In those moments, I would have a closed throat and it was hard to talk. If I could talk, I felt like if I opened my mouth, I would spew forth so much emotion that it would be uncontrollable. Just opening my mouth felt terrifying because I thought I would cry, I thought I would yell, I would have complete loss of control of myself because I had stuffed it down so much and my anxiety was so high, right? It became overwhelming. It felt like this boiling point within my body where I knew it was going to come out and I didn't know how. So trying to process that and trying to reason with it and cope it back down, push it further down was always the strategy. I want to give you a few examples specifically of ways in which I've been affected or had specific examples of anger in my past to give you a true understanding of what I've internally tried to suppress. In past relationships, I had some very toxic dynamics in which a large majority of the relationship was fighting. It was a constant fight to some extent, is how it felt, or the peace wasn't long lasting. So when the fighting would occur, it would be explosive. It would be never ending. Felt like it wouldn't end until I broke, until I cried and was in a weakened state. Then the fight could be over. It was very hard. It was very degrading. The problem inherently became, there was an instance where we had a fight and it was in a parking lot, or it was outside. It was cold though. And I remember we were outside for a long time fighting, probably a couple of hours. And I was cold, so I was shivering. So every time after that occurrence, when I would get into a fight, when I would start feeling discomfort, when I would start feeling like this anger, like I didn't know how to stop the altercation from happening, but I was in it, right? I was experiencing it. My body would start shaking uncontrollably. I would start shivering for the entirety of the fight because it was re-triggering that moment in my brain. My anxiety was manifesting physically in my body, literally shaking during fights. That eventually stopped, but I had this underlying fear of anger that I didn't really have the awareness of, right? One of my last jobs, I was in tech support, and even someone being angry with me on the phone, right? So for example, my company did millions of dollars worth of business. So customers would put product in their machines, and when it would fail, a lot of stake on the line. Well, they're talking to me on the phone. They're angry with me. Them being angry with me felt so overwhelming that I felt like I didn't know how to react. I didn't know how to process the emotion. So I would get really nervous and really uncomfortable. I wouldn't really know how to talk. I would get tongue-tied and tripped up. It would make me feel flush. And I had to just ride it through until it was done. Those are examples of ways in which I've had to process anger. Those are examples of ways in which the anxiety and the fear and the overwhelming dismissal and refusal to feel anger choked me off. Now, the thing is that I've been going to therapy. The thing is that I've been working on myself and been trying to find ways because I know that I have this problem with anger. Because, like I said, I resented it for so long. It felt like this thing that I couldn't be. It's funny because I talked about this in one of my videos, but I talked about it in the opposite vein. I was talking to my therapist, V, and I talked about the idea of being happy and how I could hold on to that and how I could feel that way all the time. And she told me that that wasn't the goal because happiness was a feeling, right? She said it's like anger. You're not going to be angry all the time. Well, if I'm not going to be happy all the time, and there's moments when I am and there's moments when I'm not, then there's moments when I should and when I shouldn't be angry. There's moments when I should be able to express how I feel, right? Because my goal in life is not to be suppressed and be a half version of myself. My goal is to have boundaries. My goal is to tell someone when I feel uncomfortable, when they're putting me in a situation that I don't like, when they're stepping on me and they're putting themselves superiorly in front of me, right? It's often how it feels when you're in that kind of rage type of battle, right? Like that person is trying to minimize you, to make themselves feel superior because they already feel hurt, right? They're not processing their anger, but their way in which they're showing it is outward aggression, outward suppression of you or whoever they're fighting. That's not okay. And in going through therapy, I've been working on boundaries to better utilize my voice, to better state what I need. So while it was never an active idea, I started to feel angry. It was funny because there was a point in therapy where I've always been an emotional person. I had this conversation with my therapist recently, and I really liked her perspective where she was talking about people who feel deeply and how that's honestly just kind of a terrible term because realistically, you're just feeling. You're not feeling deeply, you're just feeling. Everybody else is incapable of doing so, hence they feel overwhelmed by your emotions, but truly you're not doing anything except feeling your emotions. So in feeling my emotions, there came a point in which I felt very closed off when I started going to therapy, or I wasn't really feeling a lot of my emotions. And there came this point where I just started crying. I broke down and all of my emotions came online. I was talking to my grandpa on the phone, actually. I was listening to a song. I was listening to a new playlist, or a new album, excuse me. It was by Quay, Kwaye, beautiful artist. It was an album I hadn't heard before, and I was listening to it, and I started, listening through the tracks, and then my grandpa called me right in the middle of it. I was talking to my grandpa, and as soon as I got off the phone with him, it continued playing the songs. Well, it started playing the song High and Low. And when it came on, it hit me really heavy because I realized after the fact that the song was about unconditional love. And in that moment, that perfect coalescence of timing, it rocked me. And I started sobbing. I just became extremely emotional and started sobbing. And I cried for the entirety of the song. And after that, for the next couple days, I would just be walking around thinking, I was in the shower, I was listening to a different song. Whatever it was, my emotions just all came on and I just kept crying. And after a little bit of time, it finally stopped. And I started feeling things again. And when I started feeling things again, I not only started to feel sadness, I not only started to be in touch with my emotions and what I felt and what I thought, but I started feeling anger again too. And I didn't realize it at first, but I realized that when I started talking about things and when I started talking to people, I was angry. I felt this anger welling up inside of me, and I felt okay about sharing it. It felt good to get it out of my body. And the thing is that at first I was really afraid. I didn't want it to come off like it had always been portrayed to me, right? I didn't want to minimize someone. I didn't want to dump all of that anger in like the example of like venting, right? I've had instances where people vent at me and they didn't process the emotions for themselves and they didn't say the thing they wanted to say to that person. So they reenact the exact conversation onto me into that venting session as if I'm the person where they're yelling and screaming and crying on the phone and it's all directed at me. And I was afraid that I was going to do that. I was afraid that I was going to be overly angry, that I was going to express all of this rage and, lambast all these people in my life, but do it in a way in which I would be attacking someone else, right? I was afraid I was going to do that in therapy. I didn't. But the thing is, in some capacity, that is not okay. But even if I would have gone a hair too far, that's also okay. Because I'm learning to feel things. I'm learning to feel happiness. I'm learning to feel anger. And I'm learning to express that for the first time in my life. To assert the boundaries, to feel safe in my own skin. To defend myself, not just other people. So if I go a hair too far, it's probably expected. My goal is not to be perfect. My goal is to find balance. And I can't find balance until I found the boundary, right? I'm setting boundaries for others, but I'm setting boundaries for myself too. So if I go too far, then I know where the far is. Then I'll come back and I'll find the happy medium in between those points. Allowing yourself to feel anger, happiness, everything is the most important thing you can do. Because you're finding your center. You're finding what feels right for you, how you can better interact with people around you, and how you can protect yourself and be an active member of your life going forward. So, I don't know if any of this was coherent. I hope that it was. But if you're a person who doesn't like expressing anger, if you're a person who's afraid to assert your boundaries and be mean to others, or you're afraid of putting someone down because you know exactly how it feels, know that it's okay if you try. Know that it's okay if you put yourself first and you say, you know what? I'm going to be angry today. Because maybe today is the day that anger is, hey, I'm angry with you right now. I don't like how you're treating me, and I want you to stop. Because you're minimizing me, and I deserve to have equal balance in this relationship. I deserve to feel confident and bold and assertive in my life and in my choices. So you don't get to talk to me that way. Maybe today is the day that anger comes back around. Maybe today is the day that anger doesn't have to be rage. It doesn't have to be passive aggression. It doesn't have to be exploding because we're not keeping it inside. Maybe today's the day we change. So, I hope you express your anger going forward. I hope you find how it feels right for you. And I hope you let others know what feels right for you. Because we're supposed to feel everything. But not everything should feel so hard. So until next time, everybody. See you then. Love you. Bye. Filming a little bit later today. Maybe. As long as Quoth will shut up. It's darker. And we'll see how that looks lighting-wise. This is one that this is probably going to come at the end of the video, so, this is just kind of the behind-the-scenes stuff I like to do. I was going to film this earlier in the day. I had an amazing hike, and I was like, I don't really feel like filming a video. I don't think I will. And then I was sitting with this topic, and it just kind of been chewing at the back of my mind all day, and I'm like, I feel like if I don't try to talk about this now, I'm going to wake up at 1 a.m. and feel like I need to record and have all this shit on my mind. This is usually what happens if I don't record and I've thought about a topic heavily. So if this video came out interesting, yeah, I guess you know why now. Anyway, thanks for watching. Bye. Huh?